Council wanted to address one issue before you do, just to clarify the court's ruling on the last objection with regard to Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker's scope of testimony on direct related to a particular phone call that he received on February the 9th, and information that he documented with regard to that call. Court allowed defense counsel to go into not what knowledge, if any, he had about a previous call on February the 8th. The other questions about other documents, other QuickBook documents or records, was beyond the scope and was particularly burdensome since the witness himself could not see or read those documents. So that was the reason for the court sustaining objections as to other documents and screens not utilized by the witness with regard to the February the 9th call. Certainly, counsel has the opportunity to call other either custodians of records or other QuickBook representatives to testify to any other QuickBook records. So, you wanted to be heard on something, Mr. Mooney?
Well, we see it a little different, Your Honor. First, I noticed that the witness was looking at the documents that were being put up to the screen and actually being able to see those. That was visible to me. I think to maybe anyone who looked, he actually looked at the documents and then recognized them himself. So this idea that he can't see was obviously not 100% accurate.
That wasn't my observation.
It was mine. And I saw him look at a document and then identify it. So I'm not sure what to call that. The other thing is, the court is well aware that we were severely limited on our ability to cross, especially when it comes to showing documents. And especially in the case where refreshing memory or looking back and so forth is going to happen because, you know, that's just the nature of this case. It's so old. The interview with Hankey was in 14, referring back to a 2010 conversation. This is not going to all be readily apparent. Even his job changed, so to remind him of what he did back then and so forth. It's not, we didn't get into the February 8th phone call. It was the prosecution who got into it on direct and made it linger out there as something that they don't fully understand. So that's why I had to get into it.
That allows you to go into the February 8th call.
I understand, but I'm saying that the court made a comment that that it's beyond the scope. Something was beyond the scope. Well, there's going to be, whether you perceive it to be beyond the scope or not, we should have been given some leeway as to what we can ask and how we do it, especially since we had to deal with the limitations of a witness that's not here, and we're dealing with a tiny camera trying to show him documents. A little leeway would have been appreciated by the court, and especially since the court knows what we were, the constraints we had with this witness to begin with, especially on the court's last question about the email. If that's only an optional field, the agent or the support personnel does it by name, and that's why that name was in there. And when he said he does a search by just the email, that was not accurate based on their screens that they sent us. This is not screens that we got. They gave them to us as what they use for searching. Now, he can say he doesn't see it or he doesn't say it, but I should be allowed to ask him about that screen. It's a customer search screen that pops up when the call comes in. And
we're allowed to ask him questions about the screen he utilized on the call. But the other screens that may have been available or may have been part of the QuickBook records that he did not utilize and did not see on that call were not relevant. And to his testimony as to the February 9th call, you can still call any other witness from QuickBooks for all of that additional information. With regard to refreshing his recollection, I did indicate when we discussed this yesterday that obviously having an assistant there to read the information to him could be done, and whatever documents counsel thought they were going to utilize should have been sent so the reader can do that. I also indicated that if it couldn't be done that way, I would allow counsel leeway to basically read the information to refresh his recollection. And you did that on some instances with Detective Hankey's report. You can certainly call Detective Hankey to testify to either past recollection reported by the witness or any inconsistent statements by the witness.
You know, Your Honor, I appreciate the court's suggestion, and we know that we can call certain witnesses, and we appreciate that. It's not the issue. The issue is cross-examination. A little leeway would have been appreciated, considering the court knew what limitations we were under, especially the court on their own asking this question about the email search. We should be able to then point them to the company search information that pops up on the agent's screen. I know he said that he didn't see that, but he should be able to look at that and identify what that, since he's familiar with the screen, identify it and let the jury decide whether this popped up on his screen. Maybe we have a witness that's going to say it popped up on the screen, okay? Which is why we got it, and which is why they provided it to us. But you know, it's frustrating given the constraints that we were under to begin with this witness, and the court permitted. And it's equally frustrating when the court interjects with their own question and then doesn't allow me to clarify that what field pops up for him to actually search. And the field clearly says email's optional. It doesn't say that's what they're supposed to search with.
You asked him several times, and he indicated that that was not the screen that came up on the call that he handled. It was not a screen he saw at the time of the call. So what may be on other screens or other information in the QuickBook records simply isn't relevant. I think I did give you significant leeway in questioning the witness.
Your Honor, it is frustrating also that the court is just saying because he says he didn't see it, that he didn't. Maybe our argument is he did and is not being forthright. Maybe that's our argument. And maybe we want to show that. Okay? Just because he says he didn't see it doesn't mean he didn't see it. Okay? We have information from another witness that we are planning on calling that says this screen pops up when the agent gets the call. And he should be able to identify this screen, and I should be allowed to ask him about that. And he can deny it all he wants. Even if he said, I didn't see it, he did say he was familiar with the screen, but he didn't see it on that call. Okay?
That information has already been elicited by the witness. I'm not understanding how you feel like you're hampered from cross-examination. You asked him multiple times about that particular screen.
Your
And
Honor,
he's...
Just a minute, just don't interrupt.
But can counsel address the court?
I said don't interrupt, Mr. McGee. You've been very insistent when you're speaking not to be interrupted. Give the same courtesy to the other attorneys.
That screen was thank you, Your Honor. That screen was testified to multiple times by Mr. Baker as a screen that's utilized, but not the screen that he utilized that day.
I agree that was his testimony.
And if counsel wants to bring in a witness to say that that's not true, that's fine. You can do that. But that doesn't prohibit and did not prohibit his opportunity to cross-examine this particular witness.
Your Honor, I sat down. I was done. It's only in response to the court's question, okay, that I got up and I wanted, because your question dealt specifically with the search using the email. And I
No, it did not. But my question was with regard on direct examination. His testimony was that the caller was requesting him to delete the information. On cross-examination, you suggested that the caller was asking for information for the caller to delete the information. My question was to the witness, which one was correct. Was the caller asking you to delete the information, or was the caller asking to get the information so the caller could delete it? Likewise with the follow-up emails. On direct examination, he suggested that those follow-up emails were information necessary for him to then delete the information. On cross-examination, you suggested, and he agreed, that it was information for the caller, that the emails would have given the caller the information to delete the information. So again, I simply asked which of those is correct. I did ask him with regard to the information on when the caller on February 9th gave the custom at EIP.com, did that bring up any other information on the screen about February 8th call? Said it did not.
And that's exactly the question that I was getting into, because I believe that was an untrue statement that he made. And I wanted to point out to him that his options were to put in the name. That's the option that he has. And I don't appreciate the detective's comments under his breath, not only during my question, not only my talking now, but as I'm addressing the court. He doesn't need to do that by saying or huh. Every time there's a question or a disagreement, this detective does that constantly.
That wasn't Detective Smith, it was me to Detective Smith.
It's both of
That has
them.
nothing to do with your current argument.
Correct.
I think you've made your record.
So the issue is this particular field that calls for those searches. This witness did not search regarding the email as the court suggested. And
But he didn't do the search, so he didn't have the information. He may have been able to do multiple other things and bring up multiple other records, but he didn't do it. At least his testimony is he didn't do it.
Thank you.
All right.
And just briefly, Your Honor, apologize for speaking over the court. What I was trying to do is object to Ms. Rodriguez speaking directly to my co-counsel and not to the court, which is improper to address counsel directly, so that was my intent at that point. I do want to highlight when we
Mr. Moline is quite capable of handling himself.
Yes, he is. We did speak yesterday about concerns that I had during the 402 about Mr. Baker testifies that he gives some opinion about whether or not this was suspicious and the circumstances of it. Those were addressed by the people on 2 separate occasions where he was opining about the suspicious nature of the transaction, and he even gave examples of why someone might try and do that. They're trying to hide information from a partner that is no longer with the business, and he gave all those scenarios. And we objected as foundation. The court overruled them. When Mr. Moline tried to go into that hypothetical exactly in line with the scenarios that the witness testified to, the objections for foundation were done and they were sustained. So we were not allowed to present a contrary analysis of the information in the call while the people were allowed to, and just objected to noting for the circumstance with no correction available. So
I think there's a substantial difference between them, but you've made your record. Okay, do you want to go ahead and start with the next witness for maybe 5 minutes or so?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Who's the next witness?
Mr. Russ, who was here a second ago. I know.
So you phone him line.
You're not talking to me.
Are we ready for the jury?
Yes. Members of our jury and our outfits are present, and people may call in this witness.
Michael Russ, please.
Do you solemnly state that evidential in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your full name and spell it for the record.
Michael Russ, M-I-C-H-A-E-L-R-U-S-S.
Okay, you may proceed.
What is your occupation, sir?
I am currently a sheriff's lead crime scene specialist for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department Crime Lab.
How long have you been employed as a crime scene specialist for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department?
Just over 6 years.
Do you have other experience beyond your employment with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, I worked for the Redlands Police Department for just under 10 years prior to the County Sheriff's Department.
In what capacity?
I did forensics. I was a forensic specialist. When I left there, I started as a community service officer.
What training and experience do you have to hold the position you do?
I have over 3,500 hours of forensic training, including a 400-hour National Forensic Academy at the University of Tennessee, which included time at the body farm doing.
I'm sorry, time what?
At the body farm.
Can you pull that mic a little closer?
It included time at the body farm doing gravesite excavations. Additionally, I have both on-the-job training, or what would be in a police officer role would be referred to as FTO, field training officer, training, so mentorship with another experienced person. I also have a master's degree in forensic science and a bachelor's degree in government with a minor in biology.
And in your role as a crime scene specialist, are you familiar with a device called FARO, F-A-R-O?
FARO is a manufacturer of a terrestrial Lidar scanner.
And how are you familiar with it?
I am the department trainer for the terrestrial Lidar scanner.
And what training, extra training and experience do you have with the use, operation, and maintenance of a FARO LiDAR scanner?
So I attended the initial training when the county switched from Leica terrestrial Lidar scanners to FARO laser scanners. That was a 24-hour course. And then I was sent to the Train the Trainer course, which was an additional 40-hour course. And I also attended the International Association for Forensic and Security Metrology conferences, where that was an additional 32 hours of training, as well as specific manufacturer training.
And the trainings you listed, who are they tended to be provided by?
They're provided both by the manufacturer as well as other experts in the field who are certified instructors for the manufacturer, as well as persons that are experienced using the equipment.
Can you describe for us what a LiDAR scanner is?
In the broad sense, a LiDAR scanner could be airborne, could be terrestrial. There's space-based LiDAR scanners. It's simply an instrument that uses light detection and ranging to measure things using a laser. So from the point where the scanner is located out to some distance and back, and it measures the distance between that object that's returning the laser light to the scanner.
Are there uses of it beyond the forensic sciences that you're familiar with?
Absolutely. The forensic science community is one of the smaller pieces of the LiDAR community as a whole. It's used in architecture and building, it's used in archaeology, it's used, as I said, in the space program. It's been around since, I want to say, the 1960s.
So it's not new technology.
No. It was used kind of the most referenced public perception of LiDAR technology was in the 70s during the Apollo program. It was used to map the surface of the moon.
In the forensic sciences area, what is a LiDAR scanner used for?
We use LiDAR scanners to measure crime scenes, to measure objects, to measure, to capture, if you will, a 3D view of a scene, of a location, of a vehicle, of pretty much anything that you want.
You mentioned that Faro is one manufacturer. Is there others?
Yes, sir.
How many others?
In the terrestrial LiDAR scanners, so something that's land-based, sits on a tripod, the primary manufacturers are Regal, Leica, ZNF, and Faro, and there's a couple other smaller ones, Trimble, Topcon.
What are the most common ones used in the forensic sciences, especially law enforcement uses?
Faro, Leica.
And there's a device seated or standing to your right. Is that one of those devices?
Yeah, this is a Faro X130 LiDAR scanner.
Can you please, and you may stand if you need to, describe for the jury what that device consists of and how it works? So let's start with what it consists of.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
A little bit louder, maybe.
Sure. So the scanner, like I said, is mounted on a tripod. Let me loosen it up here so we can spin it around. It comes off the tripod if you want it to. Really does. So this may be easier. So it has, if you can see in here, it has a laser. It also has a camera. Okay, and I'll try to aim it so that you can see. That shoots off of the mirror. The mirror spins.
Mr. Russ, with the court's permission, I have you step down into the well in front of the jurors so they probably get a better view of what you're pointing at.
Thanks, sir.
Just keep your voice up so the court reporter and everyone can hear you.
Absolutely. So this is a Faro X130 laser scanner. This is the screen side where the user puts in all of the user inputs. What's the project name? What's the case number? What settings do you want to use? Would you like to take pictures or do you not like to take pictures? This is the business end, if you will, this side here. This has the laser, the laser detector, as well as the camera, and they all shoot off of this mirror that the mirror spins. So as, I'm going to grab the tripod. So as this mirror spins, the instrument moves. And as the mirror spins and the instrument moves, the laser takes a path across every surface that it contacts. So it's a line of sight measurement instrument.
For clarification of the record, when you said the device moves, is it a rotation 360 degrees on the horizontal plane?
The instrument rotates 180 degrees on the horizontal plane because it's measuring out of both sides. As the mirror spins all the way around, the laser path goes from one side all the way to the other. Obviously, it doesn't measure down through itself. So in the laser data, there's a void that's the size of the tripod and the size of this instrument where it can't see through. But so the scanner is line of sight. If there are objects that are obstructing a view of another object that you want to measure, then you would have to move the scanner. After you finish that scan, you would simply move the scanner to a different location, which would allow you to then visualize that particular object. Then within software, you would put those scans together in a process called registration.
And it's about 12, so we'll go ahead and take our noon recess at this time till 1:30 this afternoon. Again, keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everyone back at 1:30. Right, the record reflects we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. Our witnesses back on the witness stand, and you may continue your examination.
Thank you, Mr. Russ. Before we broke, you talked about if you do a scan from one side and then another side, there's a registration process that occurs. Can you please explain that?
Sure. Registration is the process of putting two coordinate systems into a unified coordinate system for your entire project. So each scan that you take develops its own coordinate system, and then through the software you have one scan that becomes essentially the scan with the parent coordinate system, and all of the other scans are registered to that scan to fit them all together.
And what is done with all of that information when it's then registered together?
So once all of the scans are registered together, you have a point cloud. So there's millions and millions of data points, each with an XYZ value, how tall it is, how far away it is from whatever the 000 point of the scan set is.
When you say XYZ, you're talking about coordinates within three-dimensional space, right?
Correct.
It's been a while since I've done physics. X-axis, Y-axis, Z-axis, right?
Sure.
Okay. And I wasn't going to try and replicate which direction each of them go, but we got the idea.
You can do that for us?
Yeah. So, and actually there is the software changes the scanner produces records coordinates in a polar coordinate system, and then through registration, they're then transferred into a Cartesian coordinate system, which is a lot more information than, but that's how the software works, and that's how it then puts all of these data points together into a usable product so that you can visualize the scene that you have at the time that you were scanning.
I think the course.
Could you explain in a little bit more detail what the X, Y, and Z axis is?
Sure. So the may help to use this if you don't mind. So our and that's why it uses a polar coordinate system, much like an azimuth circle that you would use to measure points around a 360-degree data point. This becomes your data point. So instead of having a distance out and a degree angle from north, this also gives you a distance out, a degree angle from 0, 0, and a vertical angle of how far up or down, because this is 90 degrees straight above the scanner, straight down as far as it can be. Right here is negative 60 degrees. So you have a 300-degree arc around the top of the scanner and a 360-degree arc around all the way around.
I think to get back to the court's question, the x-axis, is that the vertical axis?
So the x-axis is going to, the vertical axis is going to be the z-axis.
Okay.
X-axis is out, y is. Okay.
So
So it depends on what you're doing with the scanner, but that's,
So let's be clear, which direction is the x-axis?
the Z is the vertical axis, and that's the axis that's going to give you the elevation difference. X and Y are defined as, are going to be dependent upon how you set up your scene. So it's today, X is this way, and Y is that way, Z is vertical. Okay?
Okay, I think I understand. Maybe. Okay, and then once this data is registered and compiled, what can be done with it?
So multiple things can be done with the data. You have multiple different, what we call deliverables. So I can export the entire point cloud. This is everything, every single point that I captured with the laser scan. And you can then essentially put the viewer into a virtual environment. So I can visualize the scene as I saw it when I was there, as I captured it years down the road. So it's a form of documenting the scene or a vehicle or whatever you're scanning today for, as well you can export parts of the scene. So I could export a vehicle. I could export a particular thing that was important to an investigation that we only need to focus on this crush profile in a vehicle, what have you.
I'm sorry, you used a term that we don't know and is unfamiliar with this case. What's a crush profile? Just so we're not left hanging.
Sorry, a crush profile is when one vehicle strikes another malleable surface, often a different vehicle, the one vehicle will tend to impress itself into the other vehicle. That impression is known as a crush profile.
Okay. Not that it's relevant in this case, but didn't want to leave that term hanging out there. The device, the Lidar scanner, in addition to taking the measurements on the XYZ axis and creating data points, does it also create imagery?
Yeah, it also has an onboard camera. It takes a series of 85 photographs. Well, this particular unit takes a series of 85 photographs. And then if the user wants photography, obviously it's not useful if it's the middle of the night where there's no moon and there's no lighting whatsoever. This doesn't have a flash unit, so you would get just darkness for a camera. Like if you used your cell phone in the middle of, somewhere where it's really dark, you would likely not get any information as far as photographs. The laser doesn't care about the lighting conditions, so you will still have the laser imagery, which would be a grayscale image of your scene, but then the color photographs are used to overlay the laser points to give them each a color value that corresponds to that particular location in that particular photograph.
So do I understand you correctly that the Faro device, in this case, will overlay the imagery on top of the data cloud in the corresponding locations to give you that kind of total picture?
Yes.
Okay. So for the purposes of your testimony today, to understand what a LiDAR scanning device does, did you create a demonstration of how it works?
I did.
And how did you do that?
With the court's permission, I came in and scanned the courtroom.
Was that last Wednesday when we weren't here?
Yes.
Okay. With the court's permission, I'd like to publish one portion at this point of 824.
Okay?
relevant.
Overruled.
So on 824, which is a flash drive, I'm double-clicking on the video file labeled Courtroom Demo. I'm going to pause it as it just starts. Can you explain for the jury what they're seeing at this point?
So what I did was essentially give you my perspective. This is what, if I'm looking at the judge, this is
From the witness stand.
from the witness stand what I can see. If you back the video up, the camera would pan back this way, and you would see the jury box, the rest of the room.
And is this a compilation of both that data cloud and the imagery put together and created in a video format?
Yes, so this is multiple scan positions throughout the courtroom that were then registered together to and unified into one coordinate system, and then I used what's a video tool within the software to essentially fly the viewer around the room.
So let's go through this flight real quick. I'm going to stop here where it's viewing the jury box, and specifically I'm going to point out the railing that is shown here in between the two jury boxes and the partially etched glass below it. From what I'm seeing, the railing in person is silver, brushed nickel type color, but in the image that's shown, it seems to have black specks. What is the reason for that?
The black specks are voids in the laser data, and that can be for multiple reasons. You may have a reflectance issue. Laser scanners traditionally don't measure mirrored surfaces well or reflective surfaces well. And as well, you have, for the glass, light has a constant speed that we know, that we've documented. Light going through glass goes about 35% slower because of the density of the glass. So that can mess with or change the return on glass. So, and that will give it a different look. You also have what looks like little points extending off of things. That's reflectance noise.
I stopped you here. The view is now towards past the jury box to the glass and brushed metal railing behind the jury boxes towards the front doors. Do you see the distortion or discoloration towards the wall? Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I'm describing?
Where?
So, let me try it this way.
You circle it with the mouse.
This area here, which is about 3/4 of that, again, glass and metal etched divider.
Yes.
Why is that picture not clear to look just like you would see?
Because that's a laser void. So the scanner operates in line of sight, much like your camera. If you're taking a picture if I'm taking a picture from here towards you, I wouldn't be able to see through this desk to see the floor. So you're looking at a three-dimensional picture or a three-dimensional rendering. However, there are certain areas, unless you scan every single square inch of a room, especially a room with a lot of vertical changes, like there is in this room, then you're going to have areas that are voids because there's no data. So the software doesn't create anything, it just fills it with gray. So to alert the viewer, there's no information for this area.
I stopped it briefly here. Count my chair that I'm standing in front of or behind. You only see kind of basically the top half of it. Why would that be?
That's again the same reason. There's a void area due to line of sight.
So counsel table from the front or the back would have gotten in the way of the scan.
Yes.
Okay. So when a user's provided this, it can be provided this data?
Yes.
Okay. And does that come in an application in which they can use and then view objects within it?
Yeah, so the deliverable that's most commonly used is a web viewer, currently called Scene to Go. It was previously called Web Share to Go, but that is the exportable from the proprietary software into a version that is usable if you have Google Chrome.
So I'm going to show you the Start Scene to Go on Windows that has been started here. And I'm going to hand you my mouse. And using the same Courtroom demo example, show us what is capable of the use of this application.
Well, the first thing I would show you is that the scanner has a GPS unit. So it will show a map of where the scanner was in the world when it was scanning. And you can zoom in on that, and it shows it over here. Then if you open the project, this is a top-down view. So from above, looking down through the ceiling, and I used a tool called a clipping box to limit the view of the data points that were represented for the ceiling to enable you to see down to the ground floor.
As is being displayed, this top-down view, I see 3 pinpoints, each starting with 0713 underscore URT underscore, and then 001, 002, and 004. What are those?
So those are the individual scan files, the file names of the scan, and the numbering is, if I load one of them, and we'll show, there's the project names up here. But now if I hover on one of these, hopefully. It's the file name, and then the scanner assigns a sequential numbering system to each scan. So 001, 002, 003, etc.
Okay. What else can be shown through this application?
So you can move around the room like this. So this view is what's called a quick view in the software, and it allows you to visualize what the scanner could see from that position. So this is not a three-dimensional image, this is a spherical image. So I'm locked in this view, I'm locked in this position, and I can look around, and I can zoom in, zoom out, but I can't move through from here to there. I can also adjust the color value, so I can show you what the laser saw versus what the color capture was overlaid on top of the laser data.
What other tools are available in viewing this data?
You have the ability to measure distances. You have the ability to append data points like, or log files where I want to put a pin here that this geolocation represents a piece of evidence or what have you, and you can then add PDF files of, say, reports or whatever you need to do, or image files that correspond to photographs of that thing.
How does it take measurements?
So it's measuring the 3D point cloud. So the point cloud is there, and you're using it, you're essentially clicking on individual points and pulling a measurement between things.
Can you pick an object in the room and show us how that measurement process would occur?
I can. I'm going to switch views. use here. So if, for example, we wanted to measure from there to here
There would be the front
of
corner of council table
table,
to the far corner of the court reporter's desk.
right. And it gives you the measurement.
And what was the measurement it gave you?
It gives you 5.254 meters, and then I can change that to imperial. So 17.234 feet.
And that measurement, what is the accuracy level of that measurement?
So the accuracy level of the measurement is dependent upon multiple factors. It's going to depend upon the accuracy of the individual scans. Is the measurement pulled in one single scan, or is it across multiple scans? Additionally, what was done with the scene when you were scanning to limit your error? So depending on how you scan a scene, you can have what's called compounding error. So this scanner has a 2 millimeters plus or minus error at 10 meters, so 32 feet and change. So at that distance, it's plus or minus 2 millimeters of accuracy. What you can do is design your scan progression to minimize error. So if you just went scanned around in a circle around a vehicle or a building, it's a better example. You scanned all the way around a building, and you scanned from the front all the way around to the back to the back side. Each scan position would have 2 millimeters plus or minus. Then the next one would be compounding your error, so 4 millimeters, etc. It's going to be an additive. If you then scan again around the front, then you're limiting your error. So there's methods to limit out your error. Does that answer your question? I mean, the other factors are going to be the points that are picked to measure. How well did the laser measure those points? And there's all of those things come into play.
And the human aspect to it is, would it also be dependent upon your skill with the mouse to find the right spot?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yes.
for example, you picked the left front of council table, or the right front as you view it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if you hit exactly the corner versus a few millimeters or centimeters or inches in?
Right. So, and that's one thing that you would do if you were doing measurements, and not in a demonstrative fashion, but just to really limit the measurements that you would take. You would pick points that are opposing planes, vertical planes or horizontal planes, so that you are getting a really strong return. You know the laser will get a strong return. It's going to measure it well, and that you're getting a horizontal measurement.
Would it also be helpful, for example, for you to try to measure this distance 3 or 4 or 5 times to see how close those measurements are in consistency?
Yes, you could do that.
Is there any other wonderful things you can do with this application you haven't discussed at this point?
You have a 3D button up here. Sorry, the mouse does not like this.
It does not like the black pad.
So if you click on the 3D button, then it will allow you to move through 3D space, but you need the arrow keys, which I don't have on this.
Which are over here.
Yes.
So if I were to hit the arrow key like forward, it would move you through 3-dimensional space.
Right.
as if you were walking towards council table.
Yes. And as you move through, you can see, this is one scanner's perspective. So you have what's now visible are the voids that that scanner couldn't see because of obstructions due to line of sight.
So if you were to look from the other scan location, you would see other data as well as some voids that it couldn't see.
Yes.
Anything else? Okay. You mentioned the ability to take an object out of this program and isolate it, such as a car or other item that would be unique to your crime scene or your investigation, right?
Yes.
How is that done?
What you can do, there's multiple ways to do it, but a common way to do it is to isolate that object, whatever it is, a tree, what have you, and with what's called a clipping box. So it's a software method to limit the scope of what you're dealing with. It's a three-dimensional box. And you would then export the points, tell the software to export the points that are inside of that box. And you can export them in a myriad of different file formats depending on what you're trying to give that data to, and who needs it and what software they use.
One second. Showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 401. Do you recognize the vehicle depicted in that exhibit?
Yes, this is a vehicle that I processed at the crime lab.
Are you aware at some point whether a Faro scan was done of that vehicle?
Objection, foundation, and hearsay.
Sustained unless he's the one who did it.
Did you personally do one of this truck?
I did not.
I have nothing further than, thank you.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you said when the Faro scanner, the Lidar is set up, is taking measurements or readings from multiple locations, correct? They don't.
If you move the scanner, yes.
Is the location where the scanner is, for one, measured to the location where it's put in the second location?
Is it measured as in like a total station would be, using a backside?
Correct.
No.
So how does one scanner know the distance to another scanner?
That's the process of registration. So you're using either common reference points or artificial reference points. That's the whole function of registration.
Do they ever get the registration wrong when they're trying to align those together?
Yes, you can have registration error or registration failures.
Now, you said it also could take photographs,
Yes, sir.
and you said 85 photographs.
Yes.
Is that 85 total, or is that 85 per time frame? What do you mean 85 photographs?
It takes 85, well, when you are scanning with this particular model, different scanners take different numbers of photographs depending on what the user sets. So for this particular model, if you are using the color capture setting, It takes a series of 85 photographs all the way around 360 degrees around the horizontal and 300 degrees around the vertical to enable you to add color to your point cloud.
So it's 85 pictures per scan process.
Per scan position. So each subsequent scan position, assuming you didn't change your settings and left the camera on, you would get an additional 85 photographs.
Okay. So then if you're going to do a scan from that position,
Yes, sir.
how long does it run?
It depends on the settings. I can run it for an hour. I can run it for 4 or 5 minutes. It depends on what the needs are of the particular setup.
And no matter if it runs for 4 minutes or an hour, it still only takes 85 photographs total.
Yes, sir. Because the duration of the scan is mostly, almost entirely dependent upon the length of time the laser is allowed to dwell on a particular item or object in order to measure it, as well as the spacing between laser passes. The adding color, quote unquote color, taking pictures, takes about 2 minutes per scan.
Now, this type of scanner that does the different scanning, does it have that same kind of like a fisheye lens effect on the edges, kind of like a 3D viewer, like, you know, I've used those Christmas. Does it have that same kind of
So
effect?
what it's doing is it's taking photographs through the mirror. So the camera's embedded within the scanner, it's taking photographs through the mirror, and it's only using the center of that photograph that's actually in the mirror. It's not obviously using the portion of the mirror that you can see the mirror, you can see the housing, all of those things. It's using what the engineers have defined as the useful area that is most accurate for those data points.
So then there can be distortion on the edges that is filled in by other scans.
Objection misstates his testimony, assumes facts not evidence.
Overruled, you can answer whether or not that's correct.
Could you repeat the question?
On the edges, if you have that fisheye kind of look, can it have distortions that are kind of filled in by other parts of the scan?
I haven't seen distortions on the edge of the photographs. And I'm talking about viewing an individual photograph that was taken during the scan process. So I looked at photograph number 15 out of 85. That photograph is not going to have distortions to it.
Well, like the exhibit that we saw, exhibit 824, that was kind of the fly through the courthouse, or the
Yes.
courtroom, correct me. It seemed to be like distortions on the monitor, it had spikes. I mean, some points seemed to be sticking out a little bit more. There wasn't a clear, smooth line that we see with our naked eye.
Right, yeah, that's the software applying color to the laser data. That's not the photographs. So again, each point within the point cloud, of which there's millions per scan, the scans in here are 44.5 million points per scan. I think there's 5 scans, so you know, what do you
220?
220 million points. Each one of those points has a XYZ value and a color value, and the color value is derived from the corresponding photograph, the area of the corresponding photograph that corresponds to that data point. So if you look at the photographs, just the pure photograph, in the example that Mr. Himes has, you will not see those distortions unless you're in the 3D view.
And it's the 3D view that distortions can start happening.
Right, because you have laser reflectance, laser noise, you have angle of incidence on reflected surfaces or some other issue like you have edge artifacts. When a laser hits a nice clean edge like this, the laser beam is about 2 millimeters wide. So part of the laser beam is going to impact the surface and return to the sensor. The other part is going to continue past that surface and hit something else and then return back to the sensor. So you're going to have little pixels across this area out in space that are referred to as edge noise. That's an example.
When you do a 3D view of an image taken by the Lidar, can you get kind of variances in the perspective in the projection of the image? So like if I'm looking at the courtroom, can you see weird angles that maybe not how exactly look if you're walking through in person from certain angles?
You create a view where the data set does not appear as it truly is.
Yes.
No, I don't think you can do that because the coordinate system that you establish through registration, that's the coordinate system. You can fly quote unquote. You can view the data set in multiple different angles from multiple different pitches, rolls, yaws, whatever you want, unless you're doing something strange with your view, like zooming really far back to stretch the view, then yes. But otherwise, if you're using it in a normal sense, no.
So if I'm looking at a 3D model image that was created by a scanner, and you do I'm just calling it a fly-through, flyover kind of thing.
Okay.
Like, whenever kids go through Disneyland, they fly through canyons and you go through that ride.
That's what it's called.
Right. Perfect. If I'm crossing over, let's say from your point to my point, and I'm going over the court reporter's desk in the middle, then that will get obviously larger as you get closer, correct?
The perception of size the size of the object wouldn't change. Your proximity to it would change, and therefore it would fill more of your field of view. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Is that always 100% accurate? From like what a human eye sees versus what the computers are rendering? Do you get a weird fisheye effect to it, to the things that are closer?
Objection vague as to the human versus the software.
Overruled, you can answer if you understand the question.
So my understanding of what you're asking is the fisheye effect that you're referring to is commonly experienced with very low millimeter lenses below, say, 15, 18 millimeters. Those will tend to bend straight lines on the edges. So that's the effect you're referring to?
Not the bend, it's just since you're in a close perspective, close proximity in the fly-through or the flyover, things will get a lot larger.
Because you're closer to them, so they fill your field of view. If you backed off the field of view of the viewers, for example, if I flew you at 1 meter off of the ground, and I flew you essentially through the court reporter's desk and through your desk over to you, the court reporter's desk would appear much larger because you are closer to it. However, if I flew you, and it's filling the field of view, however, if I flew you at 6 meters off the ground and did the same flight path, but 6 meters higher in elevation, the size of the objects displayed isn't going to change. The amount or the degree to which they fill your field of view would change. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Okay.
So if I take your clipping tool, your clipping box, and clip out court reporter's desk,
Yes.
and I can pretty much make it to where everything else in this courtroom is removed, and I can just have an image of her desk if we have data from all sides.
Yes.
when you're viewing that, is it important to know the distance you are attempting to view it from? As an example, if I'm back here, the desk will look like one thing. But if I'm doing a 3D view from here, it'll look greatly different. Would you agree?
The desk is going to be the same desk. Your perception of the desk would be different because it fills more of your field of view.
And so if you're making your representation of a clipped out object, it would be important to know the distance of the view so you can understand the perspective.
Objection, this states his testimony.
Could you repeat the question?
If you're going to look at an object that's clipped out with the clipping tool, is it important when you're looking at that object to know what the distance is so you can get a perspective of size, shape, and all that?
I don't know that it's necessarily important because you can view it at any distance that you determine necessary. Within the software, I can be 100 feet away or I can be 100 inches away, whichever you need to use for the purposes of your case, the software enables you to do that.
And it tells you in the software how far you are from that object in that view? Can you determine that?
You can do a measurement, sure.
Well, measurement from, if
So
that's the only thing there. If I'm
Right.
here and I zoom in and zoom out, does it tell you how distant you are from the closest point?
Well, just because you've applied a clipping box doesn't mean that everything else is gone and deleted. Everything's still there, and everything's viewable. So you could snap a measurement on the object that you're measuring, the object of importance, whatever that may be, the court reporter's desk, and then snap another measurement on the ground where you want to view from. How far is that? That's how you would do that. That's how you would establish that distance.
So you pretty much, if it's a first-person view on the fly-through, you would take a measurement from the floor, then you would rotate it down to say, okay, this is it. The total, the Z height with the X and Y at 0, so we know it's at a straight perpendicular line from the floor, correct?
Well,
So you
yeah.
can get the distance.
Right, and it's also going to give you a horizontal measurement as well, so you could snap a measurement from, again, using the court reporter's desk as an example. If you're snapping a measurement from your desk over there to the corner of the court reporter's desk, if there's horizontal variation, the software is going to report not only the linear distance, but also the horizontal change. So it'll actually give you 3 measurements, not in the web viewer, but in the actual proprietary software that we use.
Now, you were asked also on direct about the vehicle on 401, correct? The white Chevy Silverado, year 2000?
I don't know that it's a Silverado, but it's a white Chevy utility pickup truck with a contractor box back on it.
Yes, and you said on direct that you processed that vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And including that process, you took a bunch of measurements of it?
I did not take measurements of the vehicle, no.
You didn't take any measurements at all?
No.
All right, then, when you processed the vehicle, you wrote an analysis report, correct?
Objection, beyond the scope.
Yes, I wrote a report.
And do you have a copy of that report with you?
I do.
And on the last page of that 4-page report, there's a note about the terms used in this report. You know what note I'm referring to?
I do not.
There's a note, the use of the word blood in parentheses.
Objection, beyond the scope, relevance.
You know what note I'm talking about?
Yes.
Do you have that memorized?
I do not.
Would you be able to read what note is put in your report instead of trying to make you look at it, memorize it, and then try it again? That make it easier for you?
Would you like me to read it?
Please, unless you can memorize it. Okay.
The text says, note, colon,
Objection, hearsay lacks foundation.
This was your note, based on your processing?
no, sir, this is a note that is applied to every crime scene investigation report that is issued by the forensic laboratory.
And this is your report that was completed, correct?
Yes.
It's a note that's put on
Every report that our unit creates.
So it's a note on his report.
the objection sustained.
And the objection was relevance or hearsay? Never mind.
Both.
So you processed the vehicle, you were looking for possible blood, correct?
Among other things, yes, sir.
And you did a visual inspection of...
Object, beyond the scope, relevance, he was only offered for the Faro evidence.
I understand that overruled all along that areas, this is understandable.
you did a visual inspection of both the cab area and the cargo area?
Yes, sir.
And did you observe anything that was possible blood with your naked eye?
No.
And then did you use an alternative light source to search?
Yes.
And could you describe to the jury how you use an alternative light source just so they can understand that process?
An alternate light source is, for lack of a better term, an expensive flashlight that allows the user to select a particular wavelength of light that we would like to use to look for various items, whether they be hairs, fibers, fluids. Those tend to fluoresce or look different under different wavelengths of light. So we have the capability of illuminating a particular surface with that light to try to visualize anything that's not visible to the naked eye in regular white light.
And you use that source in the cab of the vehicle?
Yes.
Did you find anything that you thought could possibly be blood through that process?
No.
Did you do that to the cargo area of the vehicle?
Yes.
Did you find anything based on that process that you thought might be blood?
No.
Did you do a third process to process that vehicle for possible blood?
Yes.
And what process did you use that time?
It's a latent blood search reagent called Blue Star Forensic.
And you sprayed this Blue Star reagent inside the cab of the vehicle?
Yes.
And when you do that, what are you looking for?
We're looking for chemiluminescence. So,
Explain what that means.
chemiluminescence is a chemical reaction that produces light. In this case, Blue Star, when applied to or sprayed onto latent blood stains, glows or chemiluminesces blue-white, or bluish light.
And if the blue light comes up, how long does it usually last when it does that luminescence?
The chemiluminescence duration of the Blue Star reaction depends upon the concentration or amount of blood that is there available for the reagent to react with. So it can be 30 seconds, it can be 20 seconds, it can be 90 seconds or longer. It depends on how much is there, how long it can sit and react with that, whatever it's reacting with.
And it's safe to say, if you're ready to go and you're quick and the lighting's right, you see a reaction, you can take a picture.
Yes.
Did you do, and you did this to the process to the inside of the cab of the vehicle?
Correct.
And did you do it to the carpets and the floorboards?
Yeah, I sprayed the cab of the vehicle.
Sprayed everywhere?
Yes, sir. It's a sprayer, like a spray bottle, analogous to a Windex bottle. It's not necessarily discriminatory in where you're applying it.
Did you see any reaction on the floorboards of the cab?
No,
Did you see any reaction on the pedals for the vehicle?
no,
Did you see any on the steering wheel?
no,
On any of the gear shifts or any of that?
no,
Now, did you fold the seat forward and look back there?
yes,
Did you find any back there?
no,
Now, with the seat, it was a bench seat.
yes,
Did you find anything that illuminated on the seat?
yes, on the seat back.
And I'm going to show you what I put up there was exhibit 826. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
And is that a photograph that you took when you were doing that process?
yes,
And can I publish 826 digitally?
sure.
One good.
That's a good question. Thank you, Deputy. And did you take with your laser pointer and kind of highlight for the jury where you saw luminescence?
It's right here.
And I will zoom in at that location. And that is the blue illumination that you will see if there's a possibility of blood on the seat.
That's visually consistent with a latent blood stain, yes.
And it's possible, correct?
It's a presumptive test, that's all it is.
And so when you saw this, what's the next step you took?
I photographed it.
And then did you take a sample?
Yes, I swabbed that area.
And when you say you swabbed it, did you use one of those little Q-tip DNA kind of swabs that we
Yes.
saw demonstrate for us before?
Yeah, it's a sterile cotton swab.
And did you log that swab into property?
Yes.
Do you know what item number?
Don't, I'd have to refer to my report.
If you look on page 3 of your 4-page report, does that refresh your memory?
It does.
And what item number did you log it under?
J18,
And did you assign it a barcode?
I did.
And what was the barcode, if you could read that into the record?
The barcode is 1442002146.
And that would have then, you took that item back to the sheriff's department and put it in property for further analysis later?
Yeah, to the sheriff's central property in the evidence room.
And that's not a processing of that sample you would have done, correct?
Correct, no, I collected the sample and submitted it into property for storage for later analysis should it be deemed to be needed to be analyzed.
And now you did the same thing in the compartment, the cargo compartment, correct?
Yes,
And when you opened the compartment, did you take a picture of what was inside the compartment?
yes,
Shows from previously marked exhibit 825.
I'm going to object as to relevance, given the circumstances, but I may be heard. I wouldn't want to openly argue with the court.
Well, You processed this in 2013 or 14?
2014.
The objection to the photograph was sustained on the evidence. You can ask him as to any testing he did, however.
Okay. So when you open the cargo compartment, it was filled with items.
Objection, relevance assumes facts not evidence and violates the court's previous ruling.
Sustained as to the appearance of it.
So at some point, you were able to get inside the cargo and process it, right?
Yes.
And we covered the visual you did with the naked eye.
Yes.
You did with the alternative light source.
The alternate light source, yes.
That. And then you did Blue Star processing as well.
Yes.
And when you sprayed the Blue Star processing reagent, what happened?
It flashed white.
And when you say it flashed white, could you please describe to the jury what you saw?
A white chemiluminescence that was very brief in duration,
And where was that white luminescence?
spread throughout the cargo area.
And when you say it's very brief, did it last long enough for you to take a photograph?
No.
And when you saw that white flash of luminescence, are you trained as to understanding what that means?
Yes.
And could you explain to the jury what it means when you see a white flash of luminescence?
That is consistent with a false positive, and that your reagent is reacting with something else, whether it's it could be any number of different compounds. There are lots of different things that will react with Blue Star that produce that white chemiluminescence. But it could be soil, it could be any number of different things, rust, what have you.
But you're, based on your training, your knowledge of using that Blue Star reagent, you can say it's a negative result for the presence or possible presence of blood.
I would define it as a negative result, presumptive negative test, yes.
So as far as you're concerned, you could not locate anything that could possibly be blood in the cargo.
Objection, that calls for speculation. That's phrased.
Overruled.
I did not observe a positive Blue Star reaction in the cargo area of the truck.
So the only thing that you saw in your entire processing of the vehicle is the one reaction that's shown here in Exhibit 826, still for the jury, that small blue strip that you took a sample of and submitted for testing.
As far as the positive Blue Star reactions, yes.
Or for positive locating or suspecting of possible blood, right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, one thing I do want to ask you about the scanner you said had a GPS unit.
Yes, sir.
Do you know the accuracy of that GPS unit? Well, let me ask you a better way.
Okay.
Is the accuracy of the GPS unit only for general location of where you were, so you can map it?
To go a little broader, the accuracy of the GPS unit is going to be site-specific. It's going to depend on how many satellites the GPS unit within the scanner can actually get a signal from. So I couldn't tell you, unless I was actually at a physical location, what the accuracy is, because it's reported on the scanner when you're actually looking at the scanner, setting it up. It tells you how many satellites there are, how strong the signal is, if it's a 2D strength, 3D strength, if it has the ability to render altitude, etc.
The GPS coordinates do not come into the registration process though, right?
I'd have to look back at the technical manual for this particular scanner unit. I believe that they are embedded as metadata to where the scan position is in GPS coordinates.
But it's not meant to like say, okay, that one is exactly 12.72 meters from the other scan location. That's not what the GPS is used for.
No, that's not necessarily accurate. The GPS is one of the sensors that the software will use to enable or to assist with registration, but it's not used exclusively.
As part of your 3,500 hours of forensic training, did you not learn that the military will not allow GPS coordinates to be more accurate than anything within 6 meters for national security?
Objection assumes facts, not evidence, and irrelevance.
Overrule the answers, just wanted to know.
I was not aware of that.
It's a safety national security issue that we know.
Therefore, it assumes facts, not evidence, relevance, lacks foundation.
I think everything was covered now. 1 second. I may. And so when you do a scan with the Lidar, the Faro scanner that you have here in court today, as you said, you'll type in different things like the case number and I assume the date when the scan was done and all the different aspects of the scan that you're going to do at that time?
Yes.
As part of that, you enter in a user so you can identify whether or not you did a scan when you look at something back in the future.
You should, yes.
So any scan that's done, you can look at and say, yes, that's mine or that's not mine.
If I am running the instrument, yes, it will have my name assigned to at each scan that I am doing.
And you said it does a 360-degree visual all the way around at the Faro scanner, correct?
Yes.
But it does a 300-degree vertical scan.
Right, -60 to 90 on both sides of the scanner.
Correct. Okay, so it does not scan the floor immediately below it or the ceiling immediately above it?
No, it does scan the ceiling, the area above it, because the laser pass goes over the top. So from one side to the other, the unit rotates 180 degrees, thereby capturing 360 degrees and 300 degrees on the vertical ones.
So it doesn't capture a little bit outside of the tripod legs that it's standing on?
Yes, sir. The size of that void is dependent upon the elevation of the scanner above the ground.
And the elevation of the scanner above the ground, is that noted by the Faro scanner, or does that have to be something that was plugged in manually?
It's not noted by the scanner. It's easy enough to figure out.
By looking at the image?
By doing a measurement. So I measure from the ground plane up to the scanner location. Tell you the elevation of the scanner.
By looking at the image?
By measuring the
Data point?
yes.
Nothing for you.
Anything else?
Briefly, let me kind of work backwards. The luminescence, when you use blue star, is not conclusive for the presence of blood, correct?
No, it's a presumptive test.
And you processed the truck in September 8th of 2014, correct?
No, I don't believe that's correct.
I'm sorry, was it? Let me look back at your report.
I want to say it was August 6th.
First? 6th? Okay, August 6th. But it's 2014, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the possession history of that vehicle over its ownership history?
I sure don't. The only history I know of that vehicle is from when it was delivered to our laboratory until we let it go. Beyond that, I don't know where that vehicle came from or where it's been.
And in your career for using a Blue Star, have you had occasions for false positives?
False positive, yes.
And would it surprise you that even the sample in this case would have tested not human blood?
Would it surprise me?
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. The flash of white as a false positive, you said could be caused by numerous types of chemicals or elements or other items, right?
Yes.
Could that include the
Objection is to relevance and speculative.
Could that include the chemical composition of cleaning solutions?
Yes.
The GPS and the Faro device, that has nothing to do with the measurement of particular data points, does it?
No, it's used as a tool to rough position scan locations within a particular data set to make it, you gotta remember that the software is dealing with multiple millions of data points. So using the GPS to rough position the scans within the data set makes it easier for the software and speedier for the user to get their data set processed and move on to the next step, to the registry.
But if you only have 1 or 2 satellites to use your GPS with, and it's a weaker signal strength, that doesn't change the distance between data points along the surface,
Oh, I
does
see
it?
what you're asking. No, it doesn't. It has no relevance on the measurement function of the scanner. That's the measurement function of the scanner is purely the laser.
You were asked about the change in perspective of an object within the scan and the data cloud. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And there was a long set of questions about perspective and flyovers and being in the back of the room and on top of an object, etc. You remember that?
Yes.
Does changing your perspective to an object within the data set change the spatial relationship between those data points of that object?
It doesn't change the physical representation of the size of an object, if that's what you're asking. It's your perception is going to change because your view is changing because you're closer, it's filling your field of view, but the size of the item is still the size of the item.
So the data points that created that measurement of size of item in the scan won't change just because you change perspective.
No, the size of the individual points will change because your perception of the size of the points will change because you're getting closer to them, so they're filling more of your field of view. You're essentially zooming in.
But you're not changing the data.
No.
By the way, who can operate the scanner? Do I have to call you every time I want it done?
No.
Who can operate it?
Objection is to relevance.
Sustained.
You indicated that you were a train the trainer. You've been through the train the trainer course.
Yes.
Why would you go to that class?
So that I can teach others in the department how to use it.
And when you use it, by the way, I think I may have skipped over this briefly on direct. Is it just plug and play? Or am I oversimplifying that?
It's a little more complicated than plug and play. However, we have done everything that we can do to give concise instructions to any user that picks it up so that they will be able to be successful using the instrument.
So if we heard testimony last week from Sergeant Ryan that he was present for the conducting of the scan of the light truck that's in Exhibit 401. Can he go do that?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation as to the questions and the
Sustained.
So when an operator picks it up and puts it at a location, how do they use it?
So the initial project is created within the user interface of the scanner. You're setting up your project. I'm going to call this project, this is case number 1. And I'm going to put in my name as the operator. And I'm going to decide that for the conditions that I have, I want the scanner to have a particular point spacing. I want the scanner to measure the scan set this many times. So you're dealing with resolution quality settings. I'm going to decide whether or not I want to take pictures, depending on the needs of the case. But beyond that, once you've set up those parameters, much like operating a camera in manual mode, I've set up the focal length of the lens, and I set the focus, and I set the f-stop, and I set the shutter speed and the ISO setting. Beyond that, as long as conditions don't significantly change, I can continue to take photographs. I can continue to move around and scan without changing settings.
Is there default settings, like when you power it on, is there not like a default setting that the Sheriff's Department lab has set as kind of the normal settings?
We haven't overridden the factory's default settings that, as the crime lab says, you shall do this. We have produced guidelines for settings, and there are default settings from the manufacturer based on site-specific scenarios that are most likely the best settings to use, all of the things being equal.
And the guidelines that are issued to the users within the department, do they encourage or discourage changing of any of those default settings?
It doesn't make any opinion about that. It gives you the user, we think this is probably the best settings to use. However, your conditions, you have to set it up for what conditions you have. And a significant portion of that is what time you have available to do this. And as I said earlier, I can set up a scan and have it run for an hour. If I don't have an hour available to me because there's weather coming in or for whatever reason, then I need to reduce the duration of the scans to get all of the scanning done that I need to get done.
When you mentioned registration failure on cross, how is that remedied if there is some type of registration failure when you're combining multiple scans?
So registration failure, the software will report back to you, the user, hey, I can't figure, as though the software was person, I can't figure out how these scans go together. So the user has to then either redefine how they want the registration to be done. There's different varieties or different ways to register scans within Faro software, or they have to register things manually, to the point of, if it's a very complicated registration, which can happen, you can pick individual points that are the same within 2 separate scans and tell the software, this point and this point are the same. And as long as you have 3 corresponding points that are separated enough away from each other, you can put those 2 scans together by registering those points together, by telling the software these 3 points are the same. Usually we use more than 3 points, but that's the minimum.
You said you're the department trainer, so have you trained everyone in the department to use it, or just certain people?
No, certainly not every member of the department. The department has over 3,000 deputies and additional staff is another 2,000 employees. We have a core user group that's approximately 70 people, but that's between the crime lab, homicide detail, and all of the traffic MATE investigators, the major accident investigation teams. They all have scanners as well.
Would you have done that training?
I've done some of it. Farrell has done some of it. It's a collaborative effort. So,
Nothing further.
If you have anything else, we'll take our,
Just one.
sure.
I swear it's just one. When you sprayed the cab of the Chevy truck, did you see that white flash inside there as well?
no.
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 And I understand this is our last witness for today.
Yes, due to a scheduling conflict that arose this morning.
So unfortunately, we're gonna have to break a little bit early today. I apologize for that. We'll go ahead and take our evening recess till 9:30 tomorrow night, correct? Not getting any response here.
You're in charge.
I just want, well, I sometimes question that, but that's our current schedule.
Can we do 9:45? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, so 9:30 tomorrow, keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case again, that means not discussing anything about the case, any of the witnesses, testimony, exhibits, parties, or attorneys, and we'll see everyone back 9:30 tomorrow. No objection, witness being excused,
No, no objection.
No, but subject to recall, just
subject to recall, fine.